First, I want to say I'm good with regulatory reform. I like bills that generally lay out regulatory clear guidelines and time. I'm also good with natural gas. So good with it, in fact, that I don't want to blow an advantage that this country has. I have been to factories, gentlemen, and looked in the eyes of people who have lost their jobs, to Asia, to other parts of the world, to Mexico, and they looked at me and said, how did you let them ship my jobs away? We have no advantage on wages. We have no advantage on labor protections. We have no advantage on environmental protection. We have today an advantage on energy costs. I cannot understand this discussion that will inevitably lead to higher energy costs. Mr. Eisenberg, I can't understand an organization called the National Association of Manufacturers supporting this program. This bill, maybe. I understand, because this is really a regulatory bill, but the larger issue is what really concerns me. Right now, if we export to China, add in the cost of transportation, the cost of liquefaction, unliquefaction, you're talking $10. China's paying 12 or 13, so we're giving them a 30% cut in their energy costs. I just don't get it. Now, Mr. Durbin, you testified that you thought, projected out 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, I think you said 2040, 9% would be all we'd be talking about. Would you accept a friendly amendment to this bill that the presumption of the public interest would be reversed if the export was more than 9% of domestic production? I believe you when you say it, but I subscribe to President Reagan's admonition, trust but verify. I trust the industry when they says, oh, we only want to do just a little bit, it's not going to really affect the price that much, and there's endless supply, and it's all going to happen. Okay, fine, let's put it in writing. 10% I'll go with. 9% is what you said, so maybe that's where we ought to start the negotiation. But I just think this moment will be looked back at a time when Americans say, what were you thinking when we have what I call America's second chance at manufacturing, but we're going to give it away. Mr. Durbin?
Sure.
There's a question in there somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer it. I think the problem is we're posing a question as an either-or, that we can only have this abundance of natural gas here domestically for our manufacturing, or we can export it. We have both. We can do both. The issues that certainly manufacturers in New England need to be concerned about is pipeline constraints. Getting those, and I
that's a separate issue.
You're very strongly supportive of that, and I appreciate that. And
our natural gas prices were the highest in the world last winter. The world.
Exactly. So I mean,
that's a pipeline problem.
But if you look at the estimates, not industry estimates, the government estimates about how much production is going to increase, how demand is going to increase, and going out to 2040, we are going to be outstripping consumption and demand here all along. And
that's fine. All I'm saying is, put it in writing.
But I think the other aspect of this,
a cap on the export, so that we don't end up with Australia. We're producing 75 BCF a day. In the queue is 38 BCF a day for export. That's more than half, and that's what you said was the problem. You said, oh, that'll never happen, that's Australia. But that's what worries me. If there's no limit here, and there's no definition of the public interest in the statute that these guys are administering, I'm just saying, let's define it.
But I'd say that the limit is being provided by the global markets. We're not going to be exporting 10, 15, 20, whatever, or the
why not? If they're going to pay 12 or 15 over there, why wouldn't we?
Because the markets, if we're going to be exporting that much, it's going to be because the gas prices here are so low, and we have enough to provide it to those markets that they're willing to pay. I mean, you can see the global market dynamics right now are going to influence the number of facilities that are going to be built. That's always been the case.
Mr. Ciccio, what do you think?
Look at Australia. All right, so. Okay, the scale is different. I agree with what was said earlier. But the government did not provide the necessary safety nets. The resources that they have in Australia were contracted out under long-term contract to ship LNG offshore to customers at higher prices.
And once you do that, you're locked in.
Those are, yeah. And so the reserves were not available for the Australian consumer anymore. And that's why prices went up. And the Australian consumer now is being asked to pay an equivalent netback price to that LNG price that they would sell to Japan or South Korea or China. And so, again, think long-term here. Again, if there's lots of resources, everybody should support putting the necessary full implementation of the Natural Gas Act and the safety net for the consumer.
Well, thinking long-term, it seems to me a simple solution is to cap the amount of exports as a percentage of domestic production, and then you can say, okay, there will be some effect on gas prices, but it isn't going to be catastrophic like it was in Australia. There's one law Congress can't repeal, the law of supply and demand. And if you increase demand, Economics 101 says the price is going to go up. So we can't deny that the price is going to go up. That's the whole point. But the question is, how far is it going to go up? And I realize you've got to have a price that's sufficient to call forth the production and open the wells and all those kinds of things. I don't know exactly where that number is, but if we take an action here in this Congress to just open the door and end up with an Australia situation, shame on us, in my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.